The heat hit her the moment she stepped off the air-conditioned bus. Thick, wet Gulf air that clung to skin like a second layer. Naval Support Activity Bahrain sprawled before her in the late afternoon glare, all blast walls and checkpoints, and that particular shade of beige that military installations were like a uniform. She adjusted the worn duffel on her shoulder, government travel folder tucked under one arm, and joined the line at the main gate. The master-at-arms manning the checkpoint was young, eager, his movements precise in that way that suggested he'd recently graduated from his training and still remembered every word of the manual. He checked her civilian passport, scanned her common access card, and waved her through without incident. Professional, courteous, exactly what the gate should be. The admin building was different. She pushed through the double doors into processed air and fluorescent lighting, the kind that turned everyone's skin vaguely gray. A makeshift reception desk occupied what had probably once been a conference room. Folding tables, temporary signage, the organized chaos of a command post that had never quite become permanent. Behind it sat a master-at-arms first class with the kind of swagger that filled a room before he even spoke. His name tape read Kowalski, and his security contractor badge holder sat prominently on his belt like a trophy. "Help you?" He didn't look up from his computer screen. She set the travel folder on the desk. "Checking in. I'm here for the compliance review attachment, 3-week temporary duty." Now he looked up. His eyes traveled from her plain clothes, dark slacks, neutral blouse, comfortable shoes, to her duffel, to her face. She was maybe 50, maybe older, with the kind of weathered calm that came from years of making decisions that mattered. No makeup, no jewelry except a simple watch. Hair pulled back in a way that was functional rather than fashionable. "ID." She slid her CAC across the desk. Kowalski picked it up, tilted it toward the light, then turned to the contractor sitting beside him. A thick-necked man in cargo pants and a polo shirt embroidered with a private security company logo. They exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that happens between people who've decided they're on the same team against everyone else. "This doesn't look right," Kowalski said. "I'm sorry. Your paperwork. Something's off." He tapped the CAC against the desk. "Jerry, what do you think?" The contractor leaned in, made a show of examining the card. "Yeah, I don't know. Could be legit, could be fake. Hard to say." She waited. Let them play it out. Her hands rested loose at her sides, weight balanced, breathing steady. The same way she'd waited through security screenings in a dozen countries, through checkpoint delays and bureaucratic theater, and the occasional genuine threat. You learn to read the difference. What specifically looks wrong? Her voice was even conversational. "Well, for one thing, civilian clothes. But a CAC. That's unusual. Not for civilian DoD employees. Or contractors. Or any number of authorized personnel. Yeah, but you're not in the system." Kowalski gestured at his screen. "Your name doesn't pop up in the expected arrivals. Did you check the supplement list? The review team is attached separately, different routing." "I know how to do my job, ma'am." The honorific landed like an insult. "And right now, my job is telling me something doesn't add up. Jerry, you want to call this in?" The contractor was already reaching for his radio. "Yeah, we got a possible insider threat situation at admin check-in. Female, approximately 50 years old, claiming to be part of some compliance team. Paperwork doesn't verify." She felt it shift, the energy in the room changing from bureaucratic inconvenience to something sharper. Two junior sailors who'd been processing their own check-in paperwork at a side table looked up, suddenly alert. A yeoman appeared in a doorway. Curious. Kowalski stood, one hand drifting toward the duty belt at his waist. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step over here. I'd prefer to wait while you verify through proper channels. The number for the Inspector General's office is..." "I'm not calling the IG because you don't like our security procedures." Kowalski moved around the desk, and the contractor flanked to her other side. Not touching her, not yet, but boxing her in with their bodies. "This is NSA Bahrain, ma'am. We take threats seriously here. You're going to come with us while we sort this out." She could have pushed back, could have cited regulations, demanded a supervisor, made them work for it. But there were witnesses now, young sailors watching, absorbing the lesson being taught about authority and compliance, and what happens when someone questions the people with badges. And beneath that, another calculation, older and colder. Sometimes you learn more by letting people show you exactly who they were. Where are we going? Detention processing. Standard procedure for security concerns. They walked her through the admin building, down a hallway where sailors pressed themselves against walls to let the procession pass, their eyes following with the kind of hungry curiosity reserved for public shamings. Past offices where workers paused mid-conversation to stare. Into a back corridor that smelled like floor wax and old coffee, where the fluorescent lights buzzed with a frequency that set teeth on edge. The detention area was exactly what she expected. Windowless, institutional, designed to be uncomfortable without being actionable. Cinder block walls painted that same military beige. Metal chairs bolted to the floor. A single desk with a logbook that probably hadn't been updated in weeks. They directed her to sit. Took her duffel, her folder, her phone. Made a show of logging everything with theatrical precision. Quite a production, she said quietly. Kowalski looked up from the logbook. You want to tell us what you're really doing here? I already did. Right? Compliance auditor. You know how many people try to get on base with fake credentials? You know what happened at Norfolk last year? Or the incident in San Diego? I know exactly what happened. Do you? The contractor, Jerry, stepped closer. Look, lady, you can make this easy or hard. We got all day. But you? You're going to sit here until we figure out if you belong here or if we're calling NCIS. She didn't respond. Just settled into the chair with the kind of stillness that most people never achieve. Not fidgeting, not radiating impatience, just present and waiting. Her eyes tracked the room in a way that might have looked casual if anyone had been paying attention. Exit routes. Camera positions. The way Kowalski kept his right hand near his weapon, but his stance too wide for a proper draw. The way the contractor's radio crackled with traffic he wasn't actually monitoring. An hour passed, then another. People came and went. A junior officer who glanced at paperwork without reading it. A senior enlisted woman who asked if anyone had actually called the duty officer. A civilian admin who brought water nobody drank. The afternoon stretched into early evening, and the story calcified. She was a problem, possibly a threat, definitely someone who disrupted the normal order of things. Better to be safe. Better to follow procedure, even if nobody could articulate exactly which procedure they were following. We're going to need to conduct a search, Kowalski announced, returning from yet another hushed consultation in the hallway. Full security protocol. You already searched my bag. A personal search. You could be carrying anything. Data devices, recording equipment, who knows what. You mean an invasive search? I mean whatever search is necessary to ensure base security. The contractor set up a portable partition in the corner. Flimsy fabric panels that wouldn't shield sound, only sight. A female petty officer was summoned, young and clearly uncomfortable, briefed in whispers about what would be expected. This wasn't about security anymore. It was about establishing dominance, about making the disruption costly, about teaching a lesson to someone who'd had the audacity to question their authority. She stood when directed, followed the petty officer behind the partition, submitted to the indignity with the same steady calm she'd maintained since walking through the door. Because she'd been through worse, salt water and darkness, and the kind of fear that came from knowing your team was counting on you while the world tried to kill you all. This was just theater. Cruel theater, but theater nonetheless. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know from looking at civilian clothes and a middle-aged woman with a duffel bag, was the file that existed in databases they'd never thought to access. The one that documented 28 years of service. Naval Academy class of 97. Surface Warfare Officer Tour. Special Operations Selection at 27. Iraq, Afghanistan, Horn of Africa. Task Unit Commander. Squadron Operations Officer. A career built in the shadows of naval special warfare, where the loudest voices were usually the least experienced and the quietest professionals got things done. Her cover was simple because simple worked. A compliance auditor attached to a broader readiness review team, rotating through Fifth Fleet commands to assess procedural adherence and training standards. Boring. Bureaucratic. The kind of assignment that made people's eyes glaze over. perfect for observing how an installation actually operated when they thought nobody important was watching. She'd landed in Bahrain with a specific mission: assess security protocols, evaluate response capabilities, identify gaps in the chain of command coordination that kept showing up in classified after-action reports. The kind of work that required seeing the system as it actually functioned, not as it looked during formal inspections. And now she was seeing it. From behind the partition, she heard Kowalski's voice rising, not quite shouting, but loud enough to ensure his authority carried. Making jokes, speculating about her story, telling the gathered junior personnel how you couldn't trust anyone these days, how even sweet-looking middle-aged ladies could be foreign intelligence operatives, how this was what vigilance looked like. The young petty officer conducting the search was professional, at least. Apologetic even. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, You're following orders. I understand." But there were tells, if anyone had bothered to look. The tan line at her collar, faint but distinct, where insignia had sat for decades. The way she shifted weight, not nervous energy, but a door-kicker's habit of staying ready to move. The calluses on her hands. The specific, unconscious way she'd noted the fire exits and radio frequencies and the tactical vest hanging poorly on the contractor's frame. When they emerged from behind the partition, she was searched, logged, and cleared of contraband. Also stripped of another layer of dignity, which had been the point. "Now we wait for insights," Kowalski said, leaning back in his chair with satisfaction. She resumed her seat, said nothing. Let time do its work. The emergency started quietly, a radio call that turned heads, then another, then traffic spiking fast enough that even Kowalski stopped his performance to listen. Harbor Patrol reporting an unidentified small craft, moving too fast, ignoring hails. Communications glitching. Multiple stations stepping on each other's transmissions. The controlled chaos of a routine watch suddenly confronting something that didn't fit the script. Probably just fishermen, the contractor said, but his hand was on his radio. More calls. The craft was pushing toward the restricted pier area. Security alert escalating. Someone needed to coordinate the response. Harbor Patrol, pier security, host nation authorities, EOD on standby, gate traffic controlled to prevent panic. Kowalski stood, paced, picked up a phone, and put it down. "Where's the command duty officer?" In a meeting, someone called back. "What about the security chief?" "Off base." The radio traffic was getting sharper, stress leaking into professional voices. She listened from her chair, parsing the chaos with practiced ears. They had people responding, but nobody coordinating. Multiple agencies, no single command authority. The kind of clusterfuck that turned manageable situations into casualties. "Who has operational control right now?" she asked. Quiet. Direct. Kowalski spun on her. "You don't get to ask questions. Someone needs to, because in about 3 minutes, you're going to have Harbor Patrol and pier security and gate guards all making independent decisions. And that's how people get hurt. We know what we're doing. Do you? Who's controlling the radio net? Who's establishing rules of engagement? Who's making sure your host nation counterparts are looped in so this doesn't become an international incident?" "Ma'am, with respect, shut up." But she'd seen the flash of uncertainty in his eyes. The contractor was on his radio now, trying to get information, getting conflicting reports. The young officer who'd glanced at paperwork earlier appeared in the doorway, pale and overwhelmed. Outside, boots were running, voices rising. The system was failing in real time, and the people who'd been so certain about detention procedures were discovering that swagger didn't translate to operational competence. She stood. "You can tell me to shut up, or you can let me help. But decide fast, because that craft is approximately 90 seconds from the restricted zone, and if it's actually a threat, your window to respond without catastrophe is closing." Kowalski stared at her. The contractor looked between them. The young officer in the doorway made the decision for them. Desperation overriding protocol. "What would you do?" Her voice changed. Not louder, but carrying command authority that silenced the room. "Get me on the radio net. Now." Someone thrust a handset toward her. She keyed up, and the calm in her voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "All stations, This is a senior watch override. Single net coordination starts now. Harbor Patrol, report craft position and bearing. Pier security, establish inner cordon and hold traffic. Gate, restrict entry and prep for potential lockdown. Yodi, standby status and distance from threat axis. Host nation liaison, confirm their patrol assets are tracking and rules of engagement are aligned. Acknowledge in order. They acknowledged, one by one, because the voice on the radio knew exactly what to ask and exactly when to ask it, and in crisis, people gravitated toward competence like drowning sailors toward flotation. She issued clear, sequenced directions, isolated the pier lanes to prevent civilian panic, established a single radio frequency to stop the communications collision, verified that everyone understood the rules of engagement, what constituted hostile action, who could authorize what response, coordinated with explosive ordnance disposal to have assets positioned without deploying them prematurely, prevented the kind of cascading overreaction that turned security alerts into disasters. The small craft turned out to be exactly what it looked like, a lost fishing boat with a broken radio, piloted by an elderly local who drifted into restricted waters. Handled properly, it was resolved in minutes. Harbor Patrol guided him out. Host nation authorities took custody. Incident logged and closed. But during those minutes, while she'd been giving orders and the crisis had been resolving, something else had happened in the detention room. The senior enlisted woman who'd checked in earlier, a master chief with 26 years and eyes that missed nothing, had returned. During the invasive search, during the chaos, she'd been present in that quiet way senior enlisted operated. And she'd noticed what the loud men never looked for. The tattoo, visible for just a moment as clothing shifted, a naval special warfare trident, placed with the precision of old-school ink, positioned exactly where someone who'd earned it would wear it. Not for show, for memory. And the small detail on her watch, a discreet flag officer identification marker, the kind issued for exactly this type of verification when operating in environments that require discretion. The Master Chief had stepped out, made a phone call, verified through channels that Kowalski had never thought to access. Now, as the radio traffic calmed and the immediate crisis resolved, the detention room door opened with authority that changed the room's entire atmosphere. The base commanding officer entered, a Navy captain with combat ribbons and the wary respect of someone who'd been in theater long enough to know the difference between security and paranoia. He wasn't alone. Behind him, the actual Inspector General team she was attached to, looking grim. And behind them, the Fifth Fleet N2, the intelligence director, whose presence meant someone had finally read the actual orders. The captain's eyes found her immediately. Locked. His entire posture changed, voice shifting to formality that carried weight. Ma'am, Admiral, my sincere apologies for this situation. The room went silent. Kowalski's face drained of color. The contractor took a step back, suddenly very interested in the far wall. The young officer looked like he might be sick. She didn't gloat, didn't grandstand, just met the captain's eyes with the same calm she'd maintained through 6 hours of detention and humiliation. Captain, we should talk. Privately. Yes, ma'am. Immediately. And I'll need to speak with everyone involved in this incident. Later. Right now, I want a full security briefing on what just happened on your waterfront. Because that response, while ultimately successful, revealed some concerning gaps. Understood, ma'am. She retrieved her belongings, duffel, folder, phone, which were suddenly returned with extreme care. The Master Chief, who'd made the identification, stood at quiet attention, and she paused. Thank you, Master Chief. Good eye. Ma'am, welcome aboard. Wish the circumstances were better. They rarely are, but we work with what we get. In the hallway outside, she could hear Kowalski trying to explain, the contractor's voice rising in defensive justification, the young officer stammering through an apology. She didn't look back. There would be statements collected, logs reviewed, a full investigation into procedural failures and abuse of authority. The machinery of accountability would grind forward, slow but thorough. The arrogant supervisor would be relieved pending investigation. Not dramatically, not in handcuffs, but removed from duty while his actions were examined under the harsh light of actual regulations. The contractor would lose his base access, his company's oversight would tighten, and the cozy relationship between security personnel and private companies would get a serious audit. The young officer who'd looked away when he should have intervened would receive counseling and formal correction. Not career-ending, but permanently noted. No fairy tales. No dramatic confrontations in front of assembled commands. Just the cold, professional machinery of naval justice, properly applied. Before leaving the admin building, she addressed the watch team that had assembled. Junior sailors, petty officers, the ones who'd witnessed everything and absorbed the wrong lessons. Her voice was firm, but not harsh, disappointment more cutting than anger. Security without judgment is theater. Authority without respect becomes abuse. You saw what happened today because people decided their suspicions mattered more than verification, because they chose performance over professionalism. Learn from it, because the next time someone doesn't fit your assumptions, they might be exactly who they claim to be, and you'll have spent hours proving you're not qualified for the authority you've been given. She paused, let it land. Quiet professionals don't need to announce themselves. We don't wear our credentials like armor or wave our experience like weapons. We show up, we do the work, we serve without needing applause. But when you force the reveal, when you turn security into humiliation and procedure into power, you don't just disrespect one person. You disrespect every value this uniform is supposed to represent. The silence that followed was heavier than any reprimand. She walked out into the Gulf evening, heat still radiating from concrete, the base settling into the rhythm of night operations. Somewhere, accountability would unfold. Somewhere, lessons would be learned or ignored. Somewhere, the next person who didn't fit assumptions would face their own test. But tonight, she had a mission to complete, assessing readiness, identifying gaps, ensuring the quiet professionals keeping the fleet operational had what they needed to succeed. No announcements, no fanfare, just the work, the way it had always been,